If you had asked me when I was 6 who my hero was, I wouldn't have hesitated for a second. It wasn't Superman, not Batman, not any of the men in the movies. It was always my dad. He was the strongest man I knew, not just physically, though I'd watched him carry a full-size barbecue grill up our deck stairs like it was a backpack, but emotionally too. He always knew what to say when I was sad, always had a joke ready when things felt too quiet, always made me feel like I was safe, no matter what. Every Saturday morning, while other dads slept in, mine would take me to the lake, just the two of us. We didn't always fish. Sometimes we'd just sit, feet in the water, talking about everything and nothing. He once told me, "You listen to the water long enough, it tells you things." I didn't know what that meant then, but I nodded like I understood, because if Dad said it, it must be true. I used to watch the way people respected him. Our neighbors waved with warmth. My teachers smiled extra wide whenever he picked me up from school. There was this quiet dignity about him. The way he stood, the way he spoke, the way he made people feel heard. He was the kind of man I wanted to become. At home, he'd dance with my mom in the kitchen when she least expected it. He'd lift her hand like they were on a ballroom floor, even if she was still wearing her rubber gloves. I'd laugh, thinking they were silly, but somewhere deep down, I thought, that's what love looks like. He taught me how to ride my bike, how to throw a baseball, how to tie a tie. But more than that, he taught me how to show up. He was always there. For school plays, for birthdays, for scraped knees, and late night fears about monsters under my bed. I remember once waking up from a nightmare, heart pounding. I didn't even have to call out. He must have heard me stir, because moments later, he was there, rubbing my back, whispering, "I'm right here. You're okay." To me, he wasn't just a parent. He was my compass, my protector, my best friend. I know now that memories have edges, that sometimes what we remember with warmth is just one piece of a much more complicated truth. But back then, I believed in him with everything I had. He was my hero, and I never imagined that would change. It didn't happen all at once. There was no loud thunderclap, no dramatic change, just shifts, subtle, like the way autumn slides into winter, one leaf at a time. I was 13 when I noticed the first crack. Dad started coming home later than usual. At first, it was work. The Henderson project's deadline got pushed, or the new guy needs guidance. Fair enough. He was a busy man. But then the excuses started to sound, recycled, rehearsed. He still smiled when he walked through the door, still gave me the occasional wink across the dinner table. But something had changed. There was a weight in his eyes, like he was carrying something he wouldn't put down. And Mom, she changed too. She'd stir her tea in silence, stare out the window longer than usual. The sparkle that used to light up when Dad entered the room began to dull, like a light bulb slowly losing its warmth. I told myself it was just stress, work, bills, adult things I didn't understand. But deep down, I felt the air shift in our home. It was colder, thinner. One night, I was doing homework at the kitchen table when Dad's phone buzzed on the counter. He was in the shower. I glanced. at it, not snooping, just reflex, and saw a name I didn't recognize. M. No last name, just an initial. I shouldn't have cared. I didn't even know what I was looking for, but something in my stomach twisted. A few days later, I caught him whispering on the phone in the garage. Not angry, not business, something softer, warmer. When I walked in, he jumped, smiled too wide, and ended the call quickly. Just checking on a delivery, he said. I nodded, but didn't believe him. Then came the weekends he'd need time to clear his head. He'd go for drives alone, long ones, hours at a time. No fishing trips, no backyard barbecues, no stories by the fire pit, just distance. And Mom, I saw her trying. She dressed a little nicer some nights, made his favorite meals, asked him about his day, only to be met with vague responses and empty smiles. She never said it aloud, but I could feel it in her shoulders, in the way she washed dishes like the sink had wronged her. I wanted to ask her. I really did. There were nights I stood outside her bedroom door, hand half raised to knock, but then I'd hear her breathing, deep, slow, exhausted, and I'd walk away. I told myself, maybe if I didn't ask, it wasn't real. Maybe silence was safer than the truth, because a part of me still wanted to believe in the man who held me through nightmares, the man who danced with dish-gloved hands, the man who made the world feel safe. But belief is a fragile thing, and mine was beginning to tremble. There are moments in life when time fractures, when everything before feels like a different lifetime, cleaner, safer, almost innocent, and everything after, it's darker, heavier. That moment, for me, came on a Tuesday night. It was late. The house was quiet. The kind of stillness that only exists after everyone's gone to bed. I was on my way to the kitchen for water when I passed by Dad's office. The door was open just a crack. The light was off, but I could hear his voice. Soft, low, private. I paused. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I wish I hadn't. At first, I thought he was leaving a voicemail, but then I realized he was talking live. The way he spoke, it was gentle, warm, like velvet. But the words, I miss you too. I hate lying to them, but I can't stay away. Soon, I promise. Each sentence felt like a slap. Each pause between them felt like a silence I had lived through without knowing it. My chest tightened. I felt like I was underwater, my ears ringing, my breath shallow. I backed away, quietly, mechanically, like I was walking in someone else's skin. I didn't go for water. I didn't sleep that night. In the morning, I sat across from him at the breakfast table. He sipped his coffee like nothing had changed, made a joke about the cereal being stale. I stared at him, wondering how someone could hold a whole secret in their mouth and still smile. I didn't confront him. I couldn't. I was 13, old enough to understand, but too young to carry it. So I stayed silent, but life didn't. A week later, it all came crashing down. I think Mom already knew, in her own way. The distance, the late nights, the phone always turned face down. Maybe she had been waiting for proof, or the strength to face it. Either way, something tipped her over the edge. I came home from school to find Mom standing in the hallway, her hands shaking as she held a torn piece of paper. I never found out what was on it, A message, a receipt, maybe a photo. But it was enough. Enough to make her voice rise like I'd never heard before. Enough to make Dad stand in stunned silence. Enough to break the unspoken rules of our quiet household. They fought for hours, screamed, accused, pleaded. Words flew like knives, carving open every wound they had hidden for years. I sat on the stairs, hugging my knees, trying not to exist. At one point, Mom broke down in sobs so violent it sounded like her whole body was rejecting itself. And Dad, my proud, stoic father, just stood there. No fight, no denial, just a quiet, heavy shame. That night, I didn't sleep either. And the next morning, something inside me had changed. The man who used to be my hero now looked like a stranger. And the worst part, he didn't even try to explain. After the explosion comes the silence, not the kind that brings peace, but the heavy, suffocating kind that wraps around everything and refuses to let go. Our house didn't burn down, but it might as well have. The damage was everywhere, just invisible. We all stayed. That surprised me at first. No one moved out. No one packed bags. But emotionally, we were each in our own separate rooms, with walls too thick to speak through. Dad still sat at the same spot at the dinner table, still read the newspaper in the mornings, still asked me how school was, but I stopped answering. I wasn't angry, not in the way people scream or throw things. My anger was colder than that. I just shut down. He had lied. To Mom. To me. And worst of all, he acted like things could go back to normal. I remember sitting across from him one evening, watching him butter his toast like nothing had happened. I wanted to yell, "How can you just sit there? How can you pretend nothing broke?" But the words got stuck in my throat. So instead, I excused myself and went to bed early. Again, Mom wasn't much different, but she and I drifted too. It was like we were both wounded in the same war, but fighting on different fronts. She stopped asking how I was doing. I stopped offering. Sometimes we'd pass each other in the hallway, like strangers living in the same grief. I stopped going on weekend walks with Dad, ignored the movies he suggested, said no when he offered to help with homework. He tried. I could see it in the little things. He fixed my bike when the chain came loose, left my favorite snack on the kitchen counter after school, sat in the back of the auditorium during my science fair, clapping quietly when my name was called, but I didn't acknowledge any of it, because deep down, I thought, you don't get to do this. You don't get to betray us and still pretend you care. One night, I had to write an essay for English. Class, describe someone you admire. I had written about Dad every year since second grade. This time, I wrote about my grandfather, a man I barely knew, but who, in that moment, felt safer. When I handed it in, I felt something shift in me. Not relief, not satisfaction, just distance, like I was finally watching my father across a very wide room, one I didn't want to cross. He noticed. I could see it in the way he looked at me when I walked by, like he wanted to say something, but didn't know how. Like maybe he didn't recognize me anymore either. And maybe that was the saddest part of all. Time doesn't heal everything, but sometimes it softens the edges, just enough so You can breathe again. Months passed, seasons changed. The silence in our house remained, but it lost its sharpness. It no longer cut. It just lingered. Still didn't talk to my father. Not really. We exchanged necessary words. Can you pass the salt? Your mom's picking you up today. Good luck on your test. But the warmth was gone, and in its place was something brittle, like thin ice we were both afraid to step on. And yet, I started noticing things, small things. He was still showing up. When my bike tire went flat, I found it repaired the next morning. No note, no mention. When I had a cold, there was a cup of tea outside my bedroom door. It was a little too sweet. He'd used sugar instead of honey, but I drank it anyway. Maybe mistakes meant he had made it himself. He started leaving early for work, but not before checking if I needed a ride. And one evening, when I came home from school late, soaked from the rain, I found a dry towel waiting for me on the banister. It was his. He never said, "I'm sorry," in those moments, but maybe he was saying it in every quiet gesture. I didn't want to forgive him, not yet, but I also couldn't ignore what I saw. A man trying, not perfectly, not desperately, just consistently. The moment that shifted something inside me came unexpectedly. I had gotten sick, a bad fever that knocked me out for 2 days. I don't remember much, but I remember waking up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, disoriented, and thirsty. And there he was, sitting beside my bed, asleep in the chair, arms crossed, head tilted to the side, like he'd been there for hours. A part of me wanted to push him away. Another part just wanted him to stay. I whispered, "Dad?" He stirred, blinked, and, in a voice softer than I'd heard in months, he said, "Hey, kiddo, I'm here." That broke something in me, or maybe it repaired something I didn't know was still holding on. The next day, when the fever passed, he brought me soup, sat down on the edge of my bed. He didn't talk much, and then, out of nowhere, I asked him the question that had been haunting me for months. Why did you do it? He didn't flinch, didn't dodge, didn't lie. He just looked at me, eyes red rimmed, and said, "Because I was selfish, because I was stupid, because I forgot who I was, and because I thought I could fix things without breaking them first. But I was wrong. I hurt your mom. I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that. But I still love you, and I always will." I didn't answer right away. A part of me still wanted to hurt him back, to say something sharp, to remind him of everything he shattered. But instead, I looked at his hands and realized how human they looked, how tired, how familiar. Forgiveness doesn't come all at once. It's not a door that opens. It's a window, cracked slowly, over time, until the air finally changes. After that night, things didn't magically heal between me and Dad. There were still days I avoided him, still moments when I'd see his smile and remember the pain underneath it. But something inside me had shifted. I started noticing him again. Not the version I had built in my mind, but the man himself. He looked older than I remembered. The lines on his face had deepened. His shoulders slumped a little more. And for the first time, I noticed his eyes weren't proud. They were tired, like he'd been carrying a guilt too heavy for too long. I think part of me wanted him to suffer, to hurt the way I had. But what surprised me was realizing he already did, quietly, silently, every day. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find him making coffee. The smell filled the room like it used to when I was little. Without thinking, I poured myself a cup and sat across from him. He looked up, surprised. I didn't say anything, just took a sip and stared out the window. He didn't push, we just sat. Two people, breathing the same air. Finally, again. From then on, we started talking. Not about what happened, not at first, but about little things. Music, sports, my school project. The conversations were cautious, like walking barefoot across broken glass, but we kept going. One evening, months later, I found him in the garage, fixing an old lamp. He looked up and smiled that familiar, crooked smile. Want to help? And for some reason, I did. We spent the next hour passing tools back and forth in comfortable silence. At one point, he looked at me and said quietly, "You know, I never expected you to forgive me." I'm not sure I forgive myself. I didn't answer right away. A part of me still wrestled with that too, but I just looked at his hands, the same hands that once held mine as I crossed the street, the same hands that betrayed everything I thought they stood for, and the same hands that slowly, patiently had reached back out without demanding anything in return. I'm not saying it's all okay, I told him. It's not. But I'm tired of being angry. He nodded. That was enough. From then on, we didn't go back to who we were. We became something different, more honest. The pedestal was gone, but in its place stood a man who had fallen and stayed, willing to face what he broke. And I, no longer a child, was learning that maybe love isn't about perfection. Maybe it's about presence, even after the damage is done. Maybe being a hero isn't about never failing. Maybe it's about showing up when it matters most. I'm older now, old enough to understand things I once couldn't, old enough to know that the people we love will let us down. And that doesn't mean they never loved us. There are still moments I think back to that night, the phone call, the shouting, the silence that followed. Those memories are etched into my life, not to haunt me, and not to be forgiven and forgotten, but to live with, to grow from. They are part of me now, just like the love and the scars. My father and I, we never became what we used to be. And honestly, I'm glad we didn't, because what we have now is something real, stripped of illusions, grounded in truth. We talk, we laugh, we even argue sometimes, but there's no more pretending, no more masks. He still carries his guilt, I think, and maybe a part of me still carries a scar. But we've both learned how to live with it, not by ignoring it, but by acknowledging it. Together, forgiveness wasn't a moment. It was a decision I had to keep making over and over until one day it stopped feeling like a decision. It just became love again, a different kind of love, wiser, less naive, more human. I used to think heroes had to be flawless, that to admire someone meant they couldn't make mistakes. But I was wrong. Real heroes don't live above the world. They live in it. They fall. They bleed. They mess up. And sometimes They break the hearts of the people who love them most. But real heroes also stay. They show up, they own their failures, and they try, even when they have no guarantee they'll be forgiven. My father will never be the hero I once imagined. He's something more difficult than that. He's just a a man who failed, a man who stayed, a man who taught me that forgiveness doesn't make you weak, it sets you free. So if you ask me now, years later, who my hero is, I'll still say my father, but this time I'll mean it in a whole new way. Thank you for listening to this story. If it touched a part of your heart, know that you're not alone. Share your thoughts below. I read every comment, and if you want to keep walking this journey with me, hit subscribe. Until next time, stay gentle with your wounds.